Hi there.
Hi, Arjun. It's great to meet you. I'm looking forward to our conversation about TensorFlow today. To start, could you give me a brief overview of your experience with TensorFlow and how you've used it in your previous roles?
Sure. So TensorFlow is this library that I've been using for building deep learning models. Like primarily, what I worked on is building LSTMs and CNNs. So LSTMs is something that I use for time series data, and CNNs are something that I've used for image classification and stuff like that. So I primarily worked on TensorFlow Keras abstraction basically, and yeah, that's been what I worked on.
Great. It sounds like you've had quite a bit of hands-on experience with TensorFlow, particularly with LSTMs for time series analysis and CNNs for image classification. Given your experience with TensorFlow Keras, could you walk me through a specific project where you had to overcome a significant challenge and how you addressed it? I'd love to understand your problem-solving approach with TensorFlow.
Okay, so I wouldn't say that this is more of a very complex problem per se. Reason being, like, the documentation and everything was quite evolved at the time when I was working on this. So one of them, I mean, I can say more of a interesting project is an app called Watdog. It was inspired by this app called, Hot Dog or Not Hot Dog from the Silicon Valley series, basically. And what I ended up building is basically a 120 plus breed, dog breed classifier. So it's an on-device ML CNN model that was running on Android. Hands-on promotion or anything. It was just a app that I published, and that was it. Like over time, it just happened to grow organically.
That's a fascinating project, Arjun. Using TensorFlow to build an on-device CNN model for dog breed classification and getting such organic traction is impressive. It also highlights your ability to apply TensorFlow in a real-world scenario. When working on this project, did you encounter any specific challenges with the performance or optimization of the model, given that it was running on Android devices?
Not that I can remember off, to be frank. Like again, like I mentioned, there was this whole mobile version of the model that we could just fine tune, put the weights into the app. In fact, this was primarily built on the example app from the TensorFlow examples repository, basically. So it wasn't really that complicated. All I had to focus on was getting the dataset, running the train script, and then, like, putting in the model into that app. Then it was just a matter of, like, building the Android app, testing it out if it works. And it worked fairly well in the first try itself. Like, I didn't really have to spend too long. In fact, I think I spent like maybe 1 or 2 days at most training this whole thing, building the app, deploying it to Play Store. Yeah, I think that's all it takes. I mean, took at that point. And it's been a while since I did this, so I don't really know how long it really took, to be honest.
It sounds like you were able to leverage TensorFlow's resources effectively and streamline the process, which is great. Let's shift focus a bit. Given your experience, how do you approach keeping up with the latest developments in TensorFlow? And how do you decide when to integrate new features or updates into your projects?
So, I mean, it doesn't really make much of a difference when new releases are coming in, unless, let's say, the model needs to be changed or new classes need to be added. So, just because it's the new hype, or, like, the latest version, greatest version, unless there's, like, any sort of security patches or something that come in, It's not necessary that we keep up with the latest and greatest. Of course, like I mean, you can always try and build the latest model, the state of the art model, and everything if needed. But as long as the task gets done, like I don't see the need for it. I'm more of a practical engineering guy who can build models to some extent. So yeah, so to answer your initial question, like how do I stay up to date on what's happening in AI space or TensorFlow and everything? I follow a lot of handles on Twitter, and a lot of the content creators that I follow on YouTube and Instagram also are primarily from the tech space who would put out on a daily or weekly basis, like what's new, what's happening, and all that stuff. So I mean, TensorFlow, it's a great tool. You can build models and everything if you want to, but ever since large language models have come into the picture, like since the ChatGPT boom, I haven't really touched TensorFlow. Like I haven't really needed TensorFlow till date in quite some time. So it has been a while since I looked at it. But yes, I can build models with TensorFlow if needed.
It's clear you have a practical approach to integrating new developments, focusing on necessity and practicality rather than just following trends. Given your attention to practicality, how do you approach model deployment and scalability in TensorFlow, especially in a production environment? Could you share an example of how you've handled this in your recent roles?
Sure. So that's something I can go a little deeper into. So one of the places where I looked into TensorFlow model deployments was at my previous gig in Find, and what we were using over there is primarily image-based classification, segmentation models, and everything. So segmentation was PyTorch, so let's put that aside. But all the classification models were in fact, let me try and remember. I think it wasn't Inception. It was another model. I'm blacking out on the model name right now. But when it came to the deployment, what we would do is basically for TensorFlow models, we would use TensorFlow Serving. So once the model file has been exported, then we just load it up in TensorFlow Serving, and that's the container that we would use to serve the model at scale. So when it comes to scalability and deployment and handing it off to the customer, that's usually how we would go about it. Like we would wrap it in TensorFlow Serving. TensorFlow Serving has both HTTP and gRPC requests through which you can do the predict. And based on the input that goes in, you get a JSON out with the class or classification or the kind of model. Depending on the kind of model, the output would vary. So that's how I have dealt with deployment, scaling, and production environments for TensorFlow.
That's a solid approach, leveraging TensorFlow Serving for scalable deployment and making use of its capabilities for different types of requests. Your experience with handling model deployment in a production environment is quite evident. As we're wrapping up, let me ask you one final question. Based on your journey so far, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned about working with TensorFlow that you would share with someone starting out?
So it's definitely the fact that it's very easy to access this whole concept of deep learning or machine learning models through TensorFlow, I mean Keras or TF Lite. I mean any of these variations that you talk about, because for the most part your logic remains very similar. Like you load the data, you do a model.fit or model.train or whatever it's called at this point. I don't know, but that's pretty much it. And once you're done with the training, then you can do a train test. I mean, in the initial data set itself, you obviously need to do the 80-20 split, and you validate against your validation set, see how your model is performing, and then test it out in the wild, like how the performance is doing in on wild images. And based on that, I would say that TensorFlow has been my at least my go-to framework for building models from scratch. Like it's very easy to define the layers, and even if it's to implement a new paper as well, it's fairly easy to get started with that, as long as you're comfortable with Python and know a bit of the math essentials, and you're able to read through the papers and understand what each layer does and everything. So that way, I would say TensorFlow is like a very good option to consider. Of course, PyTorch has its own benefits in itself, but another benefit that I saw for TensorFlow has definitely been the cross environment deployment that we can do. Because it's like what I've noticed is on device deployment for, let's say, Android or iOS or whatever be the device that you're trying to target. TensorFlow has much better on device support as compared to PyTorch, at least when I used to work on it. So you can always convert your model to an Onyx format or something and use the Onyx runtime to deploy the model. That's another way to go about it. But built-in support for on-device deployments and on-device inference and everything, I found it to be quite mature as a platform when it comes to TensorFlow. So that's what I would say when it comes to recommending this to anyone.
That's valuable insight, Arjun. It seems like TensorFlow's ease of use, flexibility, and strong on-device support have been key in your journey. Thanks for sharing your experience and insights. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you the best in your ongoing work with TensorFlow and beyond.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Goodbye, Arjun. Take care.